It's round one, group 234. And what's fascinating isn't just who won or lost, but the incredible methodology that governed the whole thing.
The quirks, the rules.
The key insights, and yeah, the final hierarchy that got established between four, extremely different contenders.
Oh, this group was just designed to be a challenge. I mean, you've got foundational rock and roll going up against seminal 80s pop.
And then 2000s electronic evolution, and even some, aggressive punk-adjacent rock.
It spans decades. It's a real grab bag.
So let's introduce the competitors for Group 234. First up, we had Tears Roll Down, Greatest Hits 82-92 from Tears for Fears.
Okay, a Greatest Hits album. We'll definitely have to come back to that.
Oh, for sure. Then, Music by Madonna.
A huge one from 2000.
Then we jump back in time to All Summer Long, the vinyl edition from the Beach Boys.
And finally, rounding it out, all we know is Falling by Paramore.
So yeah, the span of over 4 decades of music, all fighting for just 2 spots.
Only 2 of them can move on to round 2. But I think to really get why the winner won, and maybe more importantly, why the loser lost, you have to understand the ground rules first.
And the personality of the judge.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the first thing we really need to get our heads around is the core mechanics of this whole quest. The author, Greensterox, he frames the entire project as a World Cup of music.
And that analogy is just so critical, isn't it? Because it immediately tells you everything about the structure and the process.
Right.
The framework is designed to, try and eliminate that immediate bias through direct competition.
So he randomly places albums into groups of 4.
Just like the group stage of a football tournament.
And the commitment here is, well, it's immense. It's not a quick spin of each record.
Oh, absolutely not. He listens to these 4 albums back to back.
Several times.
Over multiple days sometimes, before making any kind of final judgment.
And that repeated listening is crucial, right?
It has to be. It filters out the albums that might be, immediately catchy but don't have much depth.
The earworms.
Exactly. It favors the ones that reveal more layers or are just more durable, across multiple hearings. And then he grades them first to fourth.
And the stakes are, they're binary and they're brutal. Top 2 progress, bottom 2 are instantly out.
Gone. No appeal, no second chance. It establishes this really clear, unforgiving hierarchy that forces some tough decisions.
But we have to zoom out for a second and just reiterate that it's entirely subjective.
Oh, 100%. The author is very clear about that. This is one man's quest into his music catalog.
It's not meant to be a universal ranking. It's based on his listening history, his personal biases.
Or I guess his attempts to overcome them.
Right, and even the quality of the recordings he happens to own, which, as we'll see, becomes a big factor.
And what really drives this whole subjective quest is this astonishing fixation on data curation.
We absolutely have to talk about his digital metadata obsession. It's the foundation of everything.
It really is. It reveals the meticulous nature of the curator. The source material says he spends an inordinate amount of time just managing and correcting his digital metadata.
He even says his wife berates him for it.
Which suggests, this goes a bit beyond a typical hobby.
He confesses, and he seems pretty self-aware about it, that inconsistencies in the data are triggering. This isn't just about making the files look neat.
No, it's about maintaining perfect digital order in a library that's been growing for, 2 decades?
It's the personality of the collector, but elevated to this almost academic level of rigor.
And when you're managing a library of this size, we're talking tens of thousands of songs.
You need rules.
You need very strict organizational principles. And the specific, really granular rules he enforces on himself, they show the true depth of this dedication.
Okay, let's use the live tracks rule as a case study, because this sounds like a data entry nightmare designed by a control enthusiast.
It is remarkably complex. His specific convention for live songs dictates that they must be labeled live, but the placement is everything.
Right, he says it has to be labeled live after the song name and also after any featured artist info.
Exactly. So if you have, say, song X, feat, artist Y, and it's a live version,
it has to become song X, feat, artist Y. Live, voila. The order is non-negotiable.
Yes, that's the crucial distinction. The consistency of that final label is what defines the rule. And then there's another layer.
Oh, of course there is.
If the venue or the location of the live recording is known, that information has to be tagged after the live label.
So you could end up with a title that's like, Everybody Wants to Rule the World feat, the London Symphony Orchestra, live, Wembley Stadium, 1985.
It's an insane level of specificity.
Just to maintain uniformity across 20,000 files.
And that's the challenge he faces, right? It's this ongoing, almost Sisyphean task of maintaining this convention across this huge library. He's constantly finding new albums that defy the protocol.
Which forces him back to manual correction again and again.
But isn't there a risk that relying on this kind of arbitrary, self-imposed rule-like, where the bracket goes, doesn't it introduce a sort of paralyzing anxiety?
Yeah, that it might overshadow the actual enjoyment of the music.
Exactly.
It seems like he's spending more time policing the label than appreciating the sound.
It's a valid question. And the Seduced material shows he recognizes this dilemma himself. He links it directly to the anxiety tied to this whole decades-long effort.
He actually anticipates the criticism that all this work could just be lost if you switch his software.
And his response is so dramatic. He writes, "Shut up. You're triggering my anxiety. It's taken me 20 years to get to this point. I can never go back."
That phrase, I mean, it says so much.
It's not just about managing files anymore. It's about preserving 2 decades of intellectual and, emotional labor.
Metadata isn't just data at that point. It's the history of his listening journey, all meticulously documented.
And this intense, non-transferable system is the foundation for the kind of meticulous listening he needs for the album quest.
And this detailed methodology, this obsession, it directly sets the stage for the next major internal debate he had to resolve.
The inclusion of greatest hits albums.
Which brings us perfectly to our next section.
Yeah.
The greatest hits conundrum.
And this required Greenstocks to really undertake a critical reassessment of one of his oldest, most rigid internal biases.
Yeah, historically he admitted to having, and this is his phrase, a stick up my arse about greatest hits albums.
He saw them as an inferior breed.
Basically a cheat compared to a proper studio album.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't represent a cohesive artistic statement to him.
And this bias, it led to a really impactful decision way back in the early 2000s when he was first ripping all his CDs.
He calls it a stunningly intellectual decision now, with some sarcasm.
He chose to exclude any tracks that were duplicates of songs he'd already ripped from a core studio album.
And we have to remember the context of, 2004. He was probably working with very limited hard drive space.
Oh, for sure. A 5-gigabyte drive might have been a luxury. So saving space by skipping duplicates, it seems pragmatic.
That frugality argument is compelling, but the author suggests the duper reason was just purism. He thought compilations weren't genuine entries for a tournament trying to crown the best album.
And the result of this purist exclusion was that a lot of his greatest hits compilations were basically crippled.
Yeah, our contender for this group, Tears Roll Down, was initially rendered pointless because he only had the single non-album title track imported. The rest were duplicates.
He recognizes now how, in his words, stupid he was to maintain this bias. He was handicapping the quest from the very start.
So over a festive break, he took on this mammoth task of re-importing all those missing greatest hit CDs in full.
Embracing the redundancy, the storage space trade-off, all for the sake of completion.
And this seemingly bureaucratic, almost boring task, it led directly to the single most important methodological breakthrough in the entire quest.
It justified including all compilations.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting.
He discovered that the songs, even with identical titles, were often not the same recordings as the ones on the original studio albums.
The key was the single edit.
The single edit revelation. I mean, this is a deep cut into music marketing history. Compilations regularly feature versions of tracks that were specifically tailored for commercial radio.
They're often shorter, sometimes they have a different mix.
All designed to be more immediate, to fit into those tight broadcast slots.
And the difference in pacing is huge. A single edit, it usually just wants to get to the chorus quicker. It trims the long intros, cuts out instrumental solos.
And that fundamentally alters the overall enjoyability, or at least the entire experience of the album.
He gives this amazing example. A Eurythmics song, where the original album version was a full 3 minutes longer than the greatest hits version.
3 minutes. Imagine that. That's a fundamental change to the dramatic arc and the intensity of the track. You are, in essence, listening to a different piece of art.
One optimized for a completely different purpose.
So the Greatest Hits album isn't just a random collection of songs. It's a curatorial statement.
It's about how those songs were presented to the mass market. And that gives the compilation its own unique artistic identity.
Which validates its position in the album quest.
And this discovery applies directly to Tears Roll Down. He analyzed the track list, and while most of the songs were the standard album versions, he found one crucial exception.
Head over heels.
That's the one. On this 1992 compilation, the hit track Head Over Heels is almost a minute shorter than the original version.
A whole minute shaved off an iconic 80s track is a massive structural change. It means the listener of the compilation is getting a tighter, more commercially focused experience than the listener of the original 1985 album.
So this is the intellectual rigor we needed to see. The metadata obsession forced him to realize there are genuine, quantifiable differences between these versions.
And it removes the cheat stigma entirely.
Right. So with the methodology finally locked down, we can get to the actual music and the final rankings of Group 234.
Time to turn our attention fully to the speakers. Let's start with the winner.
Claiming first place and progressing with what he calls undeniable merit is Tears Roll Down, Greatest Hits 82-92 by Tears for Fears.
A worthy group winner, he says, which is a remarkable achievement for a Greatest Hits album, really.
Especially considering what it was up against. A debut electronic album from Madonna, historic songwriting from the Beach Boys, the raw intensity of Paramore.
The author praises Tears for Fears as a seminal pop rock outfit of the 1980s. And what makes this compilation so effective is that it just captures the peak of that decade's sophisticated production.
We're talking about albums like The Hurting and Songs from the Big Chair.
Which really pioneered these massive, layered synthetic sounds, but they still maintained this deep emotional complexity in the lyrics.
The analysis obviously highlights the huge hits Shout, which still sounds enormous today.
And Everybody Wants to Rule the World, which somehow manages to be both deeply cynical and just irresistibly catchy at the same time.
Like a quality runs deeper than just the chart toppers.
He specifically mentions the satisfying flow of the compilation, and that's so crucial for an album quest, right?
It has to feel like an album.
Exactly. Even though the tracks aren't in chronological order from their original albums, the curator of the compilation clearly organized them to maintain some kind of narrative or atmospheric momentum.
Yeah, it moves smoothly from the intense synth pop of their early work, like Mad World, which he calls out.
And then into the more polished, radio-friendly material. And including tracks like Woman in Chains and the aggressive energy of Mother's Talk.
It just ensures the energy stays high and dynamic all the way through.
This compilation, it really is a showcase of 80s production at its most ambitious.
Yeah.
You know, the massive reverb on the drums, the pristine clarity of the synths, the complex vocal harmonies.
That sonic excellence meant it could easily stand up against the newer, higher fidelity recordings from the 2000s in the group.
And let's not forget that delightful little connection detail that Greensterox discovered.
Oh, right. Roland Orzabal, one half of the duo, admitted he was massively influenced by the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson.
That's just a fascinating circle of influence, isn't it? It places Tears for Fears right in that legacy of sophisticated pop writing.
So for him to win this group overall summer long, it must have felt like a really satisfying victory. A kind of nod of recognition across the generations.
He would have been chuffed, as the author says.
Okay, moving on to second place. Securing that crucial second spot into round 2, we find Music by Madonna.
This finished in a clear second place, which is a fantastic result, especially considering it was one of the albums the author had never fully listened to before the quest.
And that's the whole point of the methodology, right?
Yeah.
Genuine discovery within your own archive.
He must have been impressed because the analysis describes it as a real grower.
And albums that improve with repeated listens, which is a necessity in this back-to-back format, they're always highly valued.
In terms of musical style, he called it a flux of chill-out electronica pop, which is a perfect description of where Madonna was artistically after Ray of Light.
It's that mix of traditional pop structures with, the new sounds of trance, ambient electronica, even folk elements.
A truly transitional work. He praised her trademark rewarding melodies combined with what he called fresh and innovative songcraft and production.
And that innovation, a lot of it probably came from collaborating with producers like Mirwais Hamadzai.
Right. He provided that crucial 21st century sheen. You hear it on the title track itself with the filtered vocals and the acoustic guitar over that driving electronic beat.
It sounded modern and established all at once.
And then a track like Impressive Instant delves deep into synthesized textures and rhythmic experiments. It shows Madonna wasn't just chasing trends.
No, she was pushing the boundaries of what commercial dance music could even sound like.
And the strength of the album is that balance. It has massive hits, but also tracks that demand you listen again to appreciate all the subtle layers.
So it's an album that truly rewards the Quest's rigorous listening methodology. A deserving runner-up.
Which brings us to the album that put up a serious fight, but was, in the end, eliminated. In third place, we have All Summer Long Vinyl by the Beach Boys.
And this is a dramatic time jump right back to 1964.
We have to put this in context. This was the 6th Beach Boys album in just 2.5 years.
The sheer prolificacy of Brian Wilson and the band back then is just staggering. They were already cultural institutions.
But there was a unique factor influencing the assessment here, the format itself. Greenstrokes listened to his vinyl copy,
which introduces this external variable into the scoring. He said the audio quality doesn't sound too bad overall.
But he had to mention the classic physical flaw. It gets a bit scratchy near the end of side 2.
Okay, that's an important point for us to challenge, isn't it? Is relying on scratchy vinyl introducing an extraneous, non-musical variable.
It's an excellent methodological debate.
Should the album quest judge the music separate from the medium's physical degradation?
In theory, you'd say yes, the music should be judged purely on artistic merit. But in the reality of this guy's personal quest, he's judging the experience.
I see.
If the last few songs on the album are distracting because of skips or surface noise, that objectively lowers the enjoyability of the album in that specific listen. It makes the quest truly personal to his collection.
So the artifact itself is part of the judgment.
Okay. And despite the sonic limitations of 1964 recordings, the album was still deemed fairly slickly produced for the era.
Which suggests they were really leveraging the recording tools available to them. And of course, the content is just stellar. It opens with I Get Around, a career-defining track.
One of the most exciting and complex pop songs of its time. It's just a showcase for Brian Wilson's harmonic genius.
And beyond that huge hit, the album is a cultural touchstone. He noted fan favorites like Little Honda and Drive-In.
He said Drive-In in particular personifies 60s U.S. teen culture.
It really is an auditory snapshot of the era, isn't it?
Absolutely. Tracks like that, they aren't just about cars and dates. They capture that carefree optimism, the economic boom that defined the post-war American teenager.
The lyrics are simple but evocative. They create this sonic landscape of cruising, beach parties, youthful freedom.
A very sharp contrast to the synthesized anxiety of Tears for Fears.
Yeah, the album shows the band's musical roots. There are these fascinating tribute tracks, like Carl's Big Chance, which sounds like a clear homage to the Shadows.
Right, the influential UK instrumental band, and Do You Remember, is literally a direct tribute to early rock and roll legends like Chuck Berry.
It's very self-aware. They understood where they stood in musical history.
And one other unique feature, for an album of this vintage, he noted the inclusion of a charming outtake track.
Which he says was rather unusual for an album of this age. It's like an early attempt to give the listener a peek behind the studio curtain.
So ultimately, a powerful, historically relevant, and highly enjoyable album.
But the innovative songcraft and production of Madonna's music were just too much for it to overcome in this specific head-to-head. The Beach Boys are eliminated in round 1.
Which brings us to our final contender, finishing in 4th place and also eliminated. Paramore's 2005 debut, All We Know Is Falling.
The author's reaction to this one was immediate surprise. He noted, I wasn't expecting this to be so heavy and intense.
Which really suggests his prior knowledge of Paramore might have been limited to their later, more polished mainstream hits.
And that surprise, it sets the tone for the critique, which was, well, it was mixed.
He acknowledged the album was foot-tapping, ear-blasting, and mildly fun in places.
But the overarching conclusion was pretty damning. He called it a fairly generic offering, especially when compared to the quality of the other 3.
The main technical critique was this perceived imbalance between the sound quality and the substance of the songs.
Right. He felt the sonics are better than the material, if truth be told, so it was well recorded, well engineered.
But the actual songs lacked the melodic hook or the structural complexity to really elevate that production.
He described the sound itself as rough around the edges.
Not obstreperously raw, but it didn't have the polished sheen of the Madonna or Tears for Fears records. He characterized it as skirting between all-out heavy rock sound and an Alkaline Trio-esque punk rock sound.
And for anyone who doesn't immediately recognize that niche, an Alkaline Trio-esque sound usually means a darker, more emotionally intense style of pop-punk.
Right, known for driving guitar riffs, a focus on angst or introspection, not just raw aggression.
So the band seemed to be experimenting, trying to figure out where they wanted to sit on the genre spectrum.
And that experimentation, or maybe that lack of a firm direction, led to the most interesting critical insight about the album.
He identified this potential artistic conflict. He suspects that Paramore secretly wants to make their material more anthemically AOR album-oriented rock.
A style focused on those massive stadium-sized hooks and a highly polished production.
And he backs this up by pointing to the track, Whoa, which he calls the most fun track here.
Suggesting it hints at that latent melodic potential. But his conclusion is that the band holds back from fully leaning into those AOR anthems because they feel thrashing their instruments is cooler.
Now that is a fascinating, deep-seated critique. It's about artistic intent versus commercial expectation.
Is the band sacrificing optimization, the ability to write timeless, stadium-filling anthems for the sake of perceived authenticity within a heavy rock subculture?
And if we look at the music, much of the album is defined by energetic tempos and Hayley Williams' powerful voice, but in the context of the quest.
Where they're up against Madonna's innovation and Tears for Fears' melodic depth.
That generic offering critique hits hard.
It just lacked the consistency, the production innovation, and maybe the historical weight to compete with its three rivals.
As a raw, energetic debut, it served its purpose. But in the context of finding the best album of all time,
Paramore was eliminated in Group 234.
So the final rankings are cemented. Tears for Fears first, Madonna second. They both progress.
And the Beach Boys and Paramore are eliminated. The quest continues.
This whole analysis of Group 234 was an intense look at the music, yes. But just as importantly, it was a deep dive into the methodology and the intense, almost anxious personality driving this whole album quest.
Absolutely. The biggest structural takeaway for me was the paradoxical value of greatest hits albums. It was completely validated by that single edit revelation.
Right. The author overturned a long-held self-defeating rule because he realized compilations aren't just duplicates.
They're distinct, commercially optimized presentations of classic tracks. That minute shorter head over heels is a fundamental difference in the artistic experience.
And we learned that context is everything in this quest. The judgment isn't just internal to the music itself.
No, the physical state of the medium matters. The vinyl copy of All Summer Long getting a bit scratchy near the end of side 2 became a real-world factor in the assessment.
And genre expectations influenced the outcome, too. The Beach Boys were judged as slickly produced for the era, which is high praise for 1964.
But that era's limitations still couldn't really compete with the vast sonic palette that was available to Madonna in the year 2000.
It just underscores the ultimate value of this highly structured, idiosyncratic approach. By forcing himself to maintain perfect metadata and listen to every track multiple times.
Even the single edits he initially dismissed.
He's forcing an unprecedented level of critical reevaluation of his entire musical universe.
The metadata obsession and the anxiety over losing all that data are paradoxically the very mechanisms that enable the deepest listening.
Because he knows precisely which version of Head Over Heels he's hearing, he can pass an informed, if subjective, judgment on the merits of that specific compilation.
Which raises an important question, I think, especially when we circle back to that Paramore critique.
If these subtle variations in track length, like the single edit versus the album version, can radically change the enjoyability and the ultimate ranking of a classic album.
What level of artistic potential is being missed when a band is perceived as deliberately holding back from its full potential?
Exactly. If Paramore is truly aiming for anthemic AOR, but they choose a generic, heavy thrashing sound because they think it's cooler or more authentic.
Are they eliminating themselves from future rounds of the quest not based on ability, but on a kind of self-imposed limitation or genre dogma?
It forces us to ask, should an album be judged on the intent the listener perceives, what the music could have been, or solely on what was actually executed?
Greenstocks is judging the execution, but his insightful critique suggests the intent might be the greater failing.
Something for you, the listener, to mull over as we dive into the results of the next bracket.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into Group 234 of the Album Quest. We'll catch you next time.